welcome. My name is Malo, and today we build a Web3 Dapp. This is part two where we are following along hashlips NFT YouTube channels, I believe 5-part series. So today we're probably going to squeeze a couple of them in there. This is for building a gallery based off of a number of different collections. I am going to be working on something on the side that I'll probably end up doing an episode around. Let me know how the connection is today, by the way, too. I'm probably not on the most stable connection, unfortunately. But hope everyone's doing well. Let's get straight into it.
How's it going, guys? My name's Daniel, aka Hashlips, and welcome back to my channel. We are currently in the process of building a gallery Dapp that's going to end up looking like this. This is indeed part 2 to this series, and we have left off here where we managed to get the wallet from MetaMask. This is exactly where we left off the last time, and even with the code. So, if you do not know what's busy happening, go and watch the first part
Oops.
of this
Give
series
me
in the
1
playlist.
second. I
We
have to do a quick pause. Good afternoon. All right, good to hear. Good to hear. I saw that little refreshing thing on the tab, so we should be good to go. Let me know if you see any disconnects. Thanks for tuning in, man. Hope you're having a good Taco Tuesday.
We are busy building this Dapp, and it's to help you get used to becoming a Web3 developer. So, let's carry on. In the previous video, we have implemented the init connection function. Now, the problem is, if we go to our Dapp and we refresh, we will need to click on connect again to make sure that we get the wallet address from MetaMask. We don't want this functionality, and instead, if I've connected before and I come to this page, that we get the address without me clicking on connect. How do we do that? Well, we can make use of React's built-in functionality where it refreshes whenever there's a state update. One of the hooks that we can use is the use effect hook. So let's go and import it here at the top, use effect. Next, what we're going to do here just before the render function is we are going to make use of this use effect, put a anonymous function, and in this anonymous function, what we are going to do is we're going to call the init connection function up here. We need to end this with empty brackets because there's no dependencies. And by doing this, if we go back to our Dapp and we refresh, you can see that our wallet is being picked up. Because as this function or this actual component renders, it calls the use effect hook once. So the next thing we want to do is actually sort out our header component and how it renders. Currently, we're only returning a div, but let's go and add some CSS styles to create a page and a header component, or at least some header styling. The first thing that we're going to do is go to the app.css file and let's go define a page style. So let's define a class, and basically a class is a style that can be applied to more than one element. And in this class, which is .page, this is how you define a class, we're going to specify a height of 100 vertical height. Then a width is going to be 100%. And we want to make the display flex. And for the flex direction, we can leave it at column. That is our page style. So now back in the app.js file, in the main div, let's go and give it a class name of page. We can save that so long, and nothing probably changed apart from we have this big connect button because it's stretching the full width of our page. One thing that I love doing, especially when it comes to styles, is I like to go back into my file and on a style that I want to see where it's being affected, give it a background color of any kind of sort. I'm going to make this aquamarine. So now that I have this style saved, if I if I go back, I can clearly see the affected boundaries of what the style is doing. I use this approach especially when it comes to layouts. The aquamarine might be a bit heavy on the eyes, so I'm going to make it a darker aquamarine, save it, go back, and then at least I can see my text. But this way we can block out the layout and be sure that we get the results that we are coding for. Okay, but this heading does not look sexy enough. And we need some text and so let's go and implement that. First things first is so basically in here what we would like to have is a div that's going to define our header. And in here, we most probably want to put these things inside. Then we're probably going to need an image. So let's define an image tag as well as a paragraph tag. So here we just for time being can put some text, and we probably need to define an image for the logo. So inside of the source directory, let's create a new folder and call it assets. And inside there, I'm going to create a new folder, call it images, like so. Now let's drag a logo image in here. So I've added my two images, basically the logo that we are going to use, as well as an OpenSea logo that we are going to use on a later stage. So I've just gone ahead and added that as well. So now what we need to do is add it to the source attribute, and we're going to specify it like so. We're going to say that this needs to require an image from assets, images, and our logo. So now when we save this, let's go and check out the results. Wow, such a big logo. This obviously needs some styles. Jumping back to the code, let's give it some styles. Let's firstly give this image a class name. And we can basically call this the art icon. That will be fine. And let's give this button a class as well. So let's give this class name. And this could just be, I don't know, button. And for the top div over here, we're going to make this the header, right? So this is the div that's wrapping these elements. So ideally, we would not like to see the button connect if we are connected already. So let's go ahead and hide the button. Put a curly bracket, and now we're going to give it an if condition, and we're going to say if the account is equal to empty, so to speak, or an empty string with a question mark, then we're going to render this button element. After the button, we're going to give it colon and then end this with another curly bracket. If I save now, I am going to get some reformatting. But essentially, what happens is we are saying if the account is empty, show the connect button. Otherwise, show the account information. This is known as a ternary operator, and you can see that because of the question mark and this colon. This is something you can read up more, and I will explain in future tutorials. But just understand, it gives us an if-else kind of statement. All right, time to go ahead and style the header, the art icon, and the button. So going back here to the app.css, we can create a header style. We can also create a button. And then lastly, the art icon style. And before we carry on, we need to remember our dots because these are classes. For the header styles, we're going to start off by providing a minimum height of 45 pixels. This is so we make sure that this is indeed going to at least be 45 pixels. We're going to use this display as flex because we want to spread out the children elements in kind of a row. Now by default, flex does display row, so we don't need to set it at all. But we are going to align the items in center, and then we're going to justify the content as space between. Both align items and justify content has to do with the spacing between the children and how this flex box space them. We are going to also add some padding, and we're going to give it a 5 pixel padding, also 20 pixels, right, on the sides. And then for the font, let's make the font size about 16 pixels, just to make it a bit bigger. Now, if we save this and go back, the image is still going to be big. So let's go ahead and quickly add some sizes for the image. I'm going to end up with a width of about 20 pixels for our image. And we can still specify the height as 20 as well, because this is a square formatted image, right? We're going to give it a margin of 5 pixels, just to make sure we also add that bit of a margin. Let's save this and go and check the results. Here we go. We can see our address, the text, as well as our logo over here on the left-hand side. Now, this is perfect. The address is a bit big, but we're going to solve that in a second. And yeah, it looks fantastic. Although we can't see where the header is really. And like I said before, I like adding at least background colors to everything so I know where they are. So for this, let's add this light aquamarine. Well, actually, last time we couldn't see it. So let's add this purple. Save it, go back, and now we can see this is where our header is actually positioned at. So for development purposes, coloring the backgrounds of elements is absolutely fantastic. This is my preferred method of doing things in CSS. Okay, so let's go and check out the button. In order to see the button pop up, let's disconnect from this website and let's refresh. Let's actually cancel and do not connect. And the thing is, we can't really see our button. Let's go and apply some styles. Here where the button is, what we're going to do is firstly, let's make the border none. Because usually with a default button, the borders are there and it looks ugly. So we're not going to have that. For the border radius, we can make it 50 pixels. We can also give it a padding and maybe 3 pixels on the sides, and then on the top and the bottom, and then 9 pixels on the sides. And then for the font size, this could be 16 as well, but we can leave that there because it's inside the header. The cursor is going to be pointer, and that's about it. We can give it a background color. Let's give it a maybe like a light gray, light gray background color. So let's save this, go back, and we can still see it's missing. That means there's something wrong in our code. So let's go back here and see why. So looking at the code, we can see we are comparing this, to be equal to an empty string. Now, technically, you can put a stricter, check there. I'm just going to turn my initial, kind of the initial value of the set account to an empty string. All right. So if we go back here, we can now see that if I refresh, yes, it wants us to log in. We can see the connect button. If we click on connect and we say connect, we should then see the wallet address. And if we refresh, we should keep on seeing the wallet address and not the connect button, unless we do go and disconnect from our Dapp. So if we go ahead and disconnect and we do refresh, that's when we'll see the pop-up as well as the button to remind us that we can connect. I want to show you that we don't necessarily want to see this big address. Let's shorten it. So in the code itself, here where we show the account, what we can do is just before the brackets, we can put like 3 dots, 3 ellipses, and then what we're going to do is in the account section, we're going to say substring this. So we're going to say we only want a small portion of this account, right? And what we need to provide it is the account dot length, which means it gives us the length of the string. And then we're going to minus 7. This should result in ellipses with the address. And that's way shorter. The
That's
person will
awesome.
still identify this as their wallet address, but yet we don't have this big address poking out, pushing the rest of the elements to the side. Our header is looking great, but we're still missing a piece. If we look at the example, we can see that there's this icon. Now, this icon is not an image, it's actually an icon that I got from the React icon library. How do we add that? Well, firstly, copy this line over here and let's go to the code. In the code in the terminal, I'm going to press Command C to cancel this operation. I'm then going to paste this command npm install React icons and save it. So after this has installed, we should have access to the icons. Now we can run the program again. So we can say npm run start, hit enter, and it should spin up our dev server again. So now we have the library installed. Taking a look at how this works is basically you import an icon and then you simply just use it. So in our example, we are going to import an icon that we want from a library, and the library that I'm going to be using is the game icons. So if I click there, we can see that we can automatically go ahead and copy this import and then replace it with whatever icon name we want to include. So back in the code, right here at the top, let's paste this import. So for example, let's say we want to use this icon. This is a cool lightning bolt icon. I want to use this instead. So I go and replace this name, and you can import multiple icons if you want to. Then down here where I see my p tag, I'm going to add a span. A span is just an element that you can use inside of a text element. And in here, I'm going to define this element itself. So if I do this, save, go back to our app, you can see the icon is already there. Let's give it a bit of spacing on the left-hand side. So what we can do is go into the element itself and basically add an inline style specifying the margin left of about 5 pixels. I also notice while going back, there's our beautiful spacing, that our logo is a bit small. So in the CSS, where we have to find the art icon, I'm going to up this to be about 30 pixels with maybe, well, we don't need to give it a margin now because it does center it automatically. And that looks way better. Like I mentioned before, we are going to make this value dynamic, but for now, the styling is complete. We are going to go ahead and remove this background color here as well as this one that we've added before. That was only for testing purposes. So this is our final result and it looks beautiful. Now, I want to take a second to ask if you have enjoyed my content to this point, please leave me a big thumbs up, comment below what has been your favorite part in this series, as well as subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. This brings us to the end of part 2 on our journey to build this gallery Dapp. In the next part, part 3, we will be looking at connecting to a smart contract and reading some data from it. That's going to be very exciting, so stay tuned for that, and the video should be out shortly. I hope you have a fantastic day. Until next time,
We're gonna get it rolling. I like the
hey,
momentum.
how's it going, guys? My name's Daniel,
We're gonna do
aka
part 3
Hashlips,
in
and
this one as
welcome
well.
back to my channel. We are looking at part 3 of building this gallery collection Dapp, eventually looking like this. In the previous video, part 2, we actually finished the header section. So if you want to follow along, follow this video tutorial series. It's in a playlist, and this is part 3, where we will be looking at connecting and interacting with the smart contract. Okay, so in order for us to understand what we're going to do is let's look at the end result. We've got all of these NFTs over here, and no, they are not living in the same contract. In fact, each one of these NFTs have their own existing smart contract. What this means is later on in the video series, I will actually show you how to read from multiple contracts. But for now, let's take a look at OpenSea of one of these contracts. Here is the time travel artwork. Now, firstly, what we'll need to do is go down and click on an NFT. We are basically finding its address. Once we're in this detail view, scroll down to the details drop down and then click on the contract address. This will take us to Etherscan. Etherscan provides us a way to interact with the contract either by reading or writing to the contract. Let's click here on the contract over there and click on read. Essentially, what we want to do in our Dapp is use code to read from this contract, much like we're going to do here. In the read contract section, there's a balance of feature function that you can call, right? And we need to pass it an address. So let's go and open MetaMask, and I'm going to grab my address and paste it in here. As soon as I query this, the balance of will return to us the amount of NFTs that this address owns. In my case, I own 2 of them. Now we can go ahead and use this value. Let's say it's 0. Then we know that this address doesn't own any of the NFTs. And if it's more than 0, yes, we do. So we can use this value as a truthy or falsy value to check whether someone indeed is an owner of this NFT collection. That being said, to interact with a contract, we need to go to the code section and we need to grab the ABI. If we scroll down, we should see the ABI here at the bottom, and here it is. So what you'll need to do is copy this entire segment. Basically, an ABI is the blueprint of a contract, and it tells us what functions, methods, and kind of things we can call on it. So, having this blueprint ready, let's go back to our project. This is exactly where we left off the last time, so if you are a bit lost, please watch the previous videos in this playlist. However, what we're going to do now is right click on Source, New Folder, and create a folder called ABI. Then create a new file in that folder and call it abi.json. After doing that, let's paste the entire ABI in here and save the file. Due to the nature of a plugin called Prettier that I have installed, it will restructure the code for me so it will look nice. But it doesn't matter if yours doesn't restructure like this. Just save the file. Now that we have the ABI in the scope of the project, we're ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and close everything apart from the app.js file. So in the app.js file right here at the top, let's go and import our ABI. And I'm simply going to call this the ABI. And we're going to import this from, we have to go back to the ABI folder and find the ABI JSON. Great, now we have the ABI, the blueprint, so to speak, imported in our project. I just want to take a second and mention that although these artworks that we have here all live on different contracts, as you can see here, they all do have the same underlying code structure, meaning that I will be able to use the same ABI for all of these contracts. Your use case might be different, but then you need to import that ABI as well and use it. Generally speaking, all NFT contracts should have the balance of feature, so you should be good with this ABI. Okay, so now back in the code, we would need to set up a provider. This we're going to do using the MetaMask as our provider and creating kind of the contract that we can interact with. Now we need to do this in a smart way because we have a lot of kind of NFTs and different contracts to read through. So we'll implement this in a function. There are many ways of doing this next step. How I like to do it is create a variable where I save my provider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I need a provider and I need a way to set the provider as well. So I'm going to use a state variable and initialize this to be null. So initially the provider will be null, and now we're going to create one. So just underneath this function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const, and I'm going to say this is our temp provider. And this we're going to equal to a new ethers provider. So we're going to search for the providers, and the one that we want is the Web3 provider, which we get to pass in our MetaMask instance, right? Our provider from MetaMask. So we can pass it window.ethereum. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and set our provider to our temp variable over here. And now we should have a provider stored in this variable ready for us to use and creating a contract, whatever the case might be. For the next step, what we're going to do is create a function over here called balance. And this will be an asynchronous function. And in this function, we are going to try and create a contract instance and read the balance of function on the contract and return the results. Our first step will be to create a contract, and we're going to use the ethers library to do this. So new ethers.contract. And what does it need? So if we hover over here, we can see that we need the address, we need an ABI, and a provider. For the address, we can go back to the contract here on Etherscan, copy the contract address, go back and paste it. Then we can simply pass the ABI variable because we have it here at the top, as well as our provider, which we now have stored over here. And this should give us a contract instance. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the balance. I'm going to create another variable and I'm going to call this temp balance. Now that we have that, we're going to query the contract itself that we've created over here. And we want to call a function on it. And that function is indeed our balance of function. For the balance of, it will need to take in our address. So we have to go back to MetaMask, go and copy our address and put it in here. Now, this function over here is asynchronous, so we will need to wait for it here at the beginning. And once we get the results back, we can simply log this out. Now, we might need to turn this into a string, so you can say to string. Otherwise, it's a big number. And because I saved, it reformatted. But basically, we're going to query the balance of function. It's going to wait, return, and we're going to log it out and see the result. At this point, nothing will happen because it's in a function and we need to call the function. So technically, we can call it here right after we initiate. But what I want to do is just copy this stuff, paste a new button, maybe call this get balance, and in here call the balance function. Now I'm going to save this, go back to our application, and here's our get balance button. If I right click, inspect, and go to the console, and I now refresh my page, click on get balance, it should give me back the balance of that address. And we can see indeed it is 2. Now we know that we can get the value back of a given contract's balance for an address. We are ready to go. We need to keep in mind that we actually need to do this for all of these NFTs. And if we go back to the code, we can see that currently we've got an address hard-coded for one contract, as well as the address of the person's MetaMask wallet. Let's go and see if we can add some kind of data source like a list that we can render through and do this balance count on. Technically, we need some kind of list that's going to store all those NFTs data. So in the source directory, let's go and create a new folder and call it data. In here, I'm going to create a new file and maybe call it data.json. And in here, I'm going to create an object with one key, call it list. The list would be an array and an array of objects. Now here we go. I did this as an example for us to have a look at how this program is going to work. This list is going to consist of multiple of these objects. Each object will have an ID, an address to the contract, a name, a type, owner, link, and an account. Each one of these objects will now correspond to basically an NFT. Now, you might notice that there's no image key, and the reason is I've made the decision to pull the images rather locally in here.
Yo, yo. Sorry, I'm not watching the comments too much. I'm working on the other screen here, kind of working along, working on a different type of DApp. So,
Than from IPFS or an online source.
but
The
using
reason
this
is
as a reference,
IPFS
which
is
is just
sometimes a
so
bit
awesome.
slow, and I want this application to be fast. So if I already know how the image of that NFT is going to look like, I might as well include it here. And we will make reference to that image based on the ID and the type. In this folder, I've got all the images of the NFTs that I'll be using. Some of them are PNG, some of them are GIF, and that's why we will define them in the data list. For now, I'm going to drag over all my assets to the images folder. Now that I know they are in here, I can now complete my data list. So I took some time to go and fill in this list. Each one of these objects over here represents an NFT and also has a corresponding image in here, whether it's PNG or GIF. The only thing that's important to me is that it corresponds to the ID number. So for this ID1 over here, this object, we have the ID1. It corresponds to the PNG one over here. We've got the token contract address, a name, the type, which is PNG. We have an owner's key initially set to false. This will be dynamically updated as we read through this data and read from the blockchain. The link simply refers to where this will link to on OpenSea, and a counter. This will tell us how many NFTs do we own. Now, this won't automatically happen. This is simply a list of data. So we've got 15 of these objects in total. I'm going to save the file and close it, and also close the assets and the ABI as well as this data. Next, in your app.js file, what we're going to do is we're going to import that data. We're simply going to call it data, and we're going to import this from data and then the data JSON file. This will be our initial value that set that list that we just created. Then let's go ahead and create a state variable, and let's call this NFTs and set NFTs. This is going to be equal to the use state hook. And initially, we are going to set this to the data that we have imported over here. So NFTs over there should technically be this list, but let's verify this and log it to the console. As a quick test, what we can do down here in the use effect, we can simply console.log our NFTs now. But remember, we have a list object because we said it's a list that we've specified here in the data as list. So we have to say nfts.list, save this, and let's go to our application and see the list over here. Perfect. Now that we know that we've got a list, we can probably start rendering it out on the screen. So I want to set up that first before we make the connection and update the data live talking to the blockchain. So firstly, what we need to do is create a main area in here. What I'm going to do first is just clean this up a little bit. I'm going to take the console.log out there as well as here. And for now, let's get rid of this button. Instead, we're going to create a div, and this is going to be our main kind of div. So a class name of main would be sufficient. And then in this div, we're going to put that list of NFTs. While we are here, let's go ahead and style this div. Go to the app.css file. Let's create a class main. And in here, let's start off with the display being flex. We need to put a flex wrap on because we're going to be wrapping the cards. The alignment of the items can be center. Justify content can also be center. Then we're going to make sure that this flexes as 1. For the padding, we can probably add how about 10 pixels padding? And then just to make sure at the top, we give a bit more space, we can add 15 pixels. Now that we have the main style, we can move on to rendering our list of NFTs. So we're going to use the map to map over our NFTs. And in here, we'll specify NFT as well as our index. Then we're going to give it an anonymous function, and map needs to return something. So technically for now, what I am going to return is just a div, div element like so. To see this have an effect, what we can do is firstly, we need to add a key. And our key would be the index that we have up here. And then inside of this div, let's just create a p tag. For now, what I'm going to render is the nft.name, right? But we need to wrap these in curly brackets. We also need to remember that it's not just NFTs, but it's nfts.list.map. So now that we're mapping over the list of NFTs, we're going to grab the name of each one and render it in this main container. So save this, go back, and here we can see all of the names. Degen Dance, YOLO YOLO, Inevitable Intellect, all in this wrapped main container. Next, what we can do is add an image. So let's add an image like so. Let's specify the source. Now, for this source, because we need it to render on the fly, we need to use require. So we're going to require this. And this is going to come from the assets, then images. But at this point, we need this to be very dynamic. As you can remember in the data, we are going to rely on the index as well as the type. Back in app.js, what we can do is instead of using double quotation marks, let's use backticks. Then over here, we're going to use a $sign and our brackets. This time saying we want the NFT.id, then dot, again, $sign, this time NFT.type. This should give us that dynamic image linking to our assets in here. So let's save this and go back to our app. And yes, we can see all the images, but they are huge. This looks pretty cool. But let's go back and add some styling to actually the image as well as this paragraph tag. In here, we can probably give this a class name of art or NFT text. And over here, let's give this a class name of NFT image. So back in app.css, let's go and do the NFT image. Over here, I think we should give it a width of 120 pixels, as well as a height of 120 pixels. Then maybe we can do a border radius of 5 pixels as well. For the NFT text, we're going to simply, first of all, start off by aligning the text as center. We can do a margin top because this is sitting below the image. So maybe a margin of 10 pixels. And then a font size smaller than our header. So maybe at 14 pixels. That should be fine. So save this and let's go check them out. The size looks correct, but the placement is kind of off. So let's wrap this and kind of give the card itself a style. So for the card styling, we're going to add a class name. This one we're going to refer to as card. Go to the app.css file, specify the card. And now we're going to involve a bit more technical styling here. For the width, I'm going to make use of the clamp feature in CSS. We're going to say that the minimum should be 120 pixels. Then, all around it should technically be 30 vertical height. It should try and fit in there. And then maximum, we're going to clamp it at 200 pixels. Clamp is a nice way to keep things a bit more responsive. What we're going to do now is add a height to the card, and this is going to be a fixed 200 pixels height. I also want to add some padding. We're going to specify a 2 and 16. Then after that, we need to display this as flex as well. As you can tell, I love using Flexbox. The flex direction here is going to be column. We're going to align the items center, and we're going to justify the content center. And lastly, let's add a margin of 5 pixels just to give it some space between.
I was muted. That's funny.
Let's go ahead now
That's lightweight talk.
and go and check out the results. Perfect. This is basically the layout of our page. We can see that the cards are nice and responsive. Even if we go into a mobile view and start squishing these around,
nice.
You can see this is nice and responsive. This is looking fantastic. Well, we're not so far away from completing this Dapp. The only thing left to do is basically hook up the blockchain part now and do a iterative function so that we can read all the data and display it differently. We'll also add these.
All right. And with that, I think it's a good place to end. I want to go cook. That's it. Just to remind everybody watching, tomorrow we have a new weekly event going down Creative Canvas. So if you have an iPad, or maybe you have a touchscreen on your laptop, or maybe one of those drawing pads, it's magma.com. It's a collaborative canvas. So we're going to start off with this big 4K square. We're going to pick a theme together, and we're all going to draw our own little bits on it and then add a background to it and complete that. Just a little fun way to come together and talk and relieve some stress and have some fun, listen to some music. Who knows, maybe we watch a show on the side. This goes down in the Discord. So if you're not already in there, please do hop in there. monkeybytes.io/Discord, bitmonkey.tv/Discord, and bitmonkey.gg/Discord. With that, this has been another episode of BitMonkey TV. It's Tech Tip Tuesday, where we build a Web3 Dapp thanks to Hashlips NFT. Please, if you're not already subscribed to their channel, you have that link in this YouTube bio. POAP secret phrase for today is Daniel is the GOAT Part 2, followed by your public wallet address, followed by the episode title. I'm going to go ahead and enable the POAP channel right now. Looks like my connection's a little choppy here. Wow. Yikes. Edit. And we'll leave it open for about 15 minutes. 15 minutes is the cutoff from pretty much, we're going to call it 5:30 Pacific. If you don't post the secret phrase, Daniel is the GOAT Part 2, followed by your public wallet address, followed by the episode title. You have the next 15 minutes to do so in the Discord. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, I'll catch you tomorrow in the Discord. And if not, Thursday for BitMonkey TV's non-fungible token Thursday, where we do an NFT trader.io tutorial. Until then, peace.